And good evening, and once again, welcome to the Shadow Gallery. I am, as always, your host, James Donnelly. And tonight we conclude our epic three-part saga of this week's new comics, bitches! I crush your head. Crush! Crush! Okay, so new comics came out today. But we're not going to be talking about those because we still have last week's stuff to talk about. And the one thing I kind of did want to talk about last night, but forgot to, was the new trailer for Man of Steel. Now, I don't know how many of you read Superman regularly. I went on Comics Alliance today, and there's a lot of comments about the trailer and how people felt about it. People seem to be, by and large, very excited about this. That this seemed to really kind of up the ante for this film as far as generating excitement levels, and it did. This is an awesome trailer. It's 3 minutes long. I mean, it's a pretty good amount of time. But the one thing that threw me for a loop is that there seems to be, instead of like this extinction level event on Krypton, there's almost like this war that's breaking out. And for those apparently sharp-eared and very well memoried people, there is a line in the trailer that Jor-El says that is actually taken directly from All-Star Superman, which I didn't realize until today when I was reading those comments on Comics Alliance, and it was like, wow, they're digging kind of deep. So, and there were theories and so on and so forth. It was nice to see Lois Lane finally get some good, actually get some dialogue in the trailer. We're still no closer to figuring out exactly what the film is going to be about. We seem, it definitely does seem to be kind of this squaring off against Zod, although the film, or the initial kind of reports from the film seem to indicate that Zod was not going to be the main villain of this film. And I don't know if that is true, or if it's another kind of, because this is, Syncope is kind of the micro production house that this is under, because that's Christopher Nolan's kind of banner. And, I don't know if this is a Christopher Nolan kind of Marion Cotillard psych out, like when she came out in the interviews and said, "I'm not Talia," and then, of course, in Dark Knight Rises, she ends up being Talia. So, yes, that was something of a shock to see in the film, but also at the same time, I was still pleased by it. Some people weren't, but that's the way it goes. I mean, you see a lot of Superman kind of running from the military here. They've got planes coming after him and so on and so forth. So we do kind of get the feeling that, yeah, there's, the people of Earth are going to have a hard time dealing with a godlike being in their midst, until at least other godlike beings start coming out of the woodwork. Because Zod does seem to be, Zod, as played by Michael Shannon, does seem to be kind of leading an army, or something to that effect. So, it'll be very interesting to see what this film ends up being like. It has this kind of very weird feel to it, though. The one thing that I've kind of constantly stated about this film, whether it's on Twitter or on Facebook or to other people, is that it has almost like this weird... it seems to be almost kind of a weird hybrid of Zack Snyder's style, action sequences, and then have kind of this contemplative, navel-gazing Terrence Malick kind of feel to it. So that's a very odd mix, and I'm just wondering if maybe if the mix gets a little bit too hard, the mix somehow makes the film feel uneven, and that's really right now my only concern about it, though, because I think that just from this trailer it looks very, very exciting. So this did get bumped up a notch on films that I really, really want to see. This is definitely going to be an opening weekend. Not going to be opening night, per se, but probably will be opening weekend, because the wife doesn't really want to see it because she doesn't like Superman as a character. But, you know, what does she know? Anyway, let's get on to the comics for this week, shall we? I think we shall. So, I'm sorry. Well, not for this week, but for the DC releases for this week. So, because that's what we did Marvel first night, Independence last night, and now it's time for DC, which there were only 4. So this might actually be shorter than the previous 2 editions. So we'll first start out with Demon Knights number 19. So basically, Kane's army has arrived at Themyscira. And they are ready to take down the Amazons. And because they have Farah, the Amazon that Kane turned, they have an inkling of how they know exactly how Hippolyta is going to gather their forces together for combat, and that's basically they will wait out the day. And they'll be steadfast and they'll be strong, but as night starts to creep in, they're going to start to get a little bit fatigued, start to get a little bit drained, and their strength won't be what it was at daybreak, because that's when battles usually happen. But because you have obviously the clearer field of vision in daytime, but these are vampires, so. But of course, we still have this whole, this big problem with the fact that, Vandal Savage has finally come back, and to kind of, again, it's not his desire per se to fight alongside of him. It's his whim. It's just he goes where the day takes him, and he just goes by what he wants to do because he's immortal and he's a dick like that, which is why he's been torturing Etrigan and Jason Blood for as many years as he had. But finally, they do gather together, and while they're traveling to Themyscira, Sir Easton has kind of a private moment in which he seems to see kind of the future that is laid out for him, and whether it is or is not something to do with this vampire horde that is attacking Themyscira. It seems to be that his connection, the voyage that he's taking here, is tied very much to Merlin, and Merlin's kind of his very cryptic messages and things like that about an evil that she will carry around with him, because obviously as we now know, Shining Knight is a he. Easton is a hermaphrodite, and when they finally do arrive, but we have an even bigger problem, is because still Etrigan is not in this battle here at all. He's completely out of strength. But what happens once they land on Themyscira and they start confronting the vampires? Lucifer is actually watching this battle, and he's kind of amused by it, and he's amused by the torturing of Jason Blood. But, of course, when he sees that Kane is the guy that's basically running the show here, he knows that this is really bad news for Hell. And so he says, well, you know what? I'm done torturing you. You know, we've got to get going here. I have to have Etrigan back. So he sends Jason Blood back up. Etrigan comes back. He gives Etrigan back all of his powers because he cannot allow Kane to continue his dreams of conquest. So, and Lucifer even tells Etrigan that if he does this and if he succeeds, he will be in his debt. So, gone the form of man, rise the demon, Etrigan. And so the demon knights and the Amazons end up laying waste to Kane's army, but not before Ystin makes her, we'll just call Ystin her, makes her sacrifice and allows Kane to bite her, to infect her. And we are then, once the battle is over and Kane's army is wholly defeated, certainly in a large part due to Etrigan, Kane, gives kind of his menacing "I'll be back" type of thing, then goes away, and then, but the reason that Ystin decided to be bitten is that she feels that it has something very directly to do with the quest for the Holy Grail, which is the quest that she's been on for quite some time. And actually, Hippolyta might have some clues as to where to begin that quest. So this ends this arc, and into the next one, we are, again, going to be full steam ahead on the quest to find the Holy Grail. It's not a shocking conclusion, because obviously we know that Kane doesn't win, but damn if there isn't some pretty suspenseful stuff that happens along the way. This new direction I shouldn't say new. Vendetti didn't really take it in a new direction, per se. It's just that he really injected a lot of life into this. The last couple issues have been great. This issue, very good. Certainly not an exception to his excellent work, but it lacks a little bit of finesse. There are great character moments, as always, with, Demon Knights has never been lacking for good character moments, but Vendetti just seems to have, he really seems to be able to tighten the screws a little bit better on each character's voice, and so it works really well. The battle seems to be less epic than it should, which is kind of like the main fault that I felt about this issue. That seems to be over just way too quickly for something that should be bigger. But like I said, we've seen that a couple times this week in comics, where you have kind of this something that should be big and ends up kind of there being a shortcut. So, but the current predicament of Ystin makes for really compelling future reading, hopefully, because now that she is infected with vampirism, how is Ystin going to, will she carry this evil around with her? Will, this eventually lead the Demon Knights to turn against her? Will she turn against them? Who knows? It's a really, really interesting way to build into the next arc, as opposed to just, boom, we're done, and move on. So this segues very nicely into where they're going to go from here, which is, again, the search for the Grail. Bernard Chang doing another great job on art here. certainly doesn't lack for illustrating skills. And again, just, Vendetti he writes this book certainly as assuredly as Cornell ever did, and I would say probably more. So Vendetti is a welcome addition to the Demon Knights title, and it's, again, one of the reasons that this title, I haven't ever even thought of dropping it, because it's always a good read. So a very solid 4 out of 5 for Demon Knights number 19. Now on to the Bat Family, in which, because 3 strong Bat titles all in the same week, the 3 perhaps strongest of the Bat titles all come out in the same week, which I think is very convenient. And usually there isn't a bad one in the bunch, and that trend very much continues this week. We're going to start with Batgirl number 19. So basically, Barbara makes, she returns back to the apartment that she shared with Alicia, and Alicia's still very freaked out about the events that happened during the death of the family arc, and she's actually been very worried about Barbara. And, it's important that, because, Barbara, by her own admission, has never had many friends, but, she definitely needs one right now. And so she decides to come mostly clean. She talks about her brother. She talks about her handicap, or her former handicap, as it were. And this is somewhat shocking to Alicia, but Alicia takes Babs' former handicap and raises her one transgender. Yes. Again, another kind of controversial decision this week is that the character of Alicia is transgender. So she is the first transgender character in a major superhero comic book. I know that cases can be made for any number of characters that have appeared in comics, and even, major company comics before. I mean, Jesus Christ, I just talked about Demon Knights, right? I mean, Yistin is transgender, but is definitely more of a she than a he. But to have a transgender character in Batgirl, this is very much, something, Simone, it's not a quota. She's not trying to fill anything up. She wants to, this is something I never felt when I read it and discovered it. It was a bit shocking, but I never felt like, okay, well, this is just something that Simone kind of pulled out of a hat because she wants to have more diversity in her books. No, I think that this is, for the character of Alicia, I think this is something that she kind of right off the bat said, okay, this is who this character will be, and we'll have time to discover that as time progresses. But right now, unfortunately, we don't have too much time to spend with that, and rightly so, because this isn't something that is earth-shattering, and something that brings her and that brings Babs and Alicia that much closer. But, duty calls, and there has to be the final confrontation between sister and brother, and mother and father. And this is where it gets scary, because you have this very stark backdrop to, this rainy, thunderous, lightning-filled night in which, James Jr. meets their mother at the carousel, and the reason that Mom has picked this place is because of this is the last time that she ever saw James Jr. smile. And so it does kind of evoke some good memories about him for her. But of course, that is very quickly undone. And Barbara arrives on the scene ready to, take him on, but also to see if there's any way that she can stop him from trying to do something terrible. And, even says, there is a point where we can get help. And James Jr. he's not having any of that. And he even, reveals to Mom that Barbara is Batgirl, or Batgirl is Barbara. And again, Mom sticks the landing by saying, I know, she told me. So that's no big revelation to her. And because Mom has had, maybe a longer time to think about this and to ruminate about who James Jr. is, or more to the point, what he is, and that he is and will always be an unrepentant killer. And he will do whatever he can to torture and murder the people that love him. Which is when Mom whips out the gun and shoots James. And, of course, this makes for the quick kind of... this issue is interesting because it is framed kind of by a horror film that both much younger Babs and James Jr. are watching together. And there's a point where the killer is about to, is killing someone on screen, and James covers his eyes and says that, and Babs, is trying to tell him to not be scared. It's just a movie. And he reveals that he wasn't covering his eyes because he was scared. He was covering his eyes because the killer was so sloppy. So, should have been something that really stuck with, and that was something that has stuck with Barbara over the years. So it's interesting that he does come back in almost this kind of movie, horror movie killer way. Is that, he kind of gets right back up and he's just back on the horse and is ready to take Barbara down, smacks her on the back of the head with this huge fucking mallet, describes in some detail about what he plans to do with Barbara. He wants to put her back in the wheelchair and basically make her watch as he kills his mother, kills their father, and she's just not having any of that. So she, fights back her concussion and, that she received from this smack on the back of the fucking head, and takes the fight totally to James Jr. And, just when things seem to kind of be going her way, it is at this point that she basically, she even says, this is, there's a line, I don't cross it, but tonight, it's going to have to be. And, and she even says to James, at this point in time, I have a mother, I have a father, and as of now, I am an only child. And this is when James seems to get the upper hand again by holding a knife to Mom's throat, but she still has one batarang left, and right through his eye, and back over the railing and into the river, into the bay. He's dead. She's killed him. And almost immediately, she tries to reach out to him, even though she's so whacked out. But kind of comforts herself in the knowledge that she tried to save him, even if she was the one that ends up putting him in the ground. And to, of course, twist the knife even further, this is the exact moment when Dad shows up and says, Batgirl, you're under arrest for the murder of my son. And this is this point where we start to see that maybe a little bit of death of the family has bled into this book in a much different way, because as she dives over the railing herself to get away from her father, she has, in her internal monologue, she says, I may have just, I know that I just said that I was an only child, but I may now have just become an orphan. So now she has to wrestle with the fact that she has killed her brother, which is something that the Bat family does not do. They do not kill. And she also has to wrestle with the fact that she has killed her own brother. And her father blames her for James's death, and rightly so, because she was in fact the one that pulled the batarang trigger, so to speak. And it's, if it had just been maybe another 30 seconds that they could have held out for, who knows how that might have changed. I mean, and this is where the narrative has to go from here, is what is going to happen now. What's going to happen with Batgirl amongst the rest of the Bat family? What is going to happen with James and Barbara's relationship? What's going to happen with dad and mom's relationship? What's going to happen with dad and daughter's relationship? And where does Batgirl go from here? So, Gail Simone, she handles all the moments in this book with such gravity and with such high drama, and Daniel Sampieri really sets this backdrop well by setting it amongst this, this raging storm of emotion and power, and it's almost operatic in its scale. There isn't a shortcut ending here. The fight between the two of them, between James Jr. and Barbara, is very intense. It is kind of no quarter given, no quarter taken. And, so the emotional impact is enhanced by Sampieri's art, which is, always, a sign of a really, really good writer-artist team. Now, I know that this book has had kind of a revolving door of artists. I'm hoping that Sampieri will stick around for a while, because he really, really did an excellent job with this issue. Because the backdrop, while being stark and being very dark, is still very vivid. And, some might call this a little bit too on the nose with the storm and drang, or with the storm and drang that is happening all around them. But, I feel that this setting really was the only appropriate setting, because it's like, the heavens themselves know that some really, really devastating stuff is going to happen here. So this was a very powerful, very, you have kind of this, I do want to talk about these DC Gatefold covers for a minute. And I also want to talk about this Channel 52 News bullshit that's at the end of every issue, which I hate. It's so embarrassingly awful. It's like, who the fuck thought of this and who's writing it? It's just awful. It's terrible. The Gatefold covers, the reveals of them and everything like that, it's kind of fun and everything like that, kind of a fun gimmick. But that's all it is, really, a gimmick. And it does kind of give away a lot of shit, that's... The cover should never explicitly tell you, okay, well, this is what's going to happen in this issue. And, that's kind of my only problem with this issue, is that you do kind of get an idea of what's coming just by looking at the cover, which is, she's, you see James Jr. falling into the abyss. Now, this is a character, again, that Simone has worked so well with, based off of the work of the writer of the next title that I'm going to discuss. And I was so glad to see James Jr. in the New 52. Sadly, not in the same kind of story arc that he had prior to this, because you couldn't really put that in the New 52, even though some elements of even that last story of Detective Comics is kind of in the New 52. New 52 is just so fucked up. Sometimes it's just like, it's so frustrating. But one way or the other, it's almost kind of sad in a way that James is dead, or is he? But if it comes around to someone deciding to bring him back at some point in time, it won't be a shock, but I'll be a little disappointed, because this was just a really good issue. Excellent issue. 4.5 out of 5. Very solid for Batgirl number 19. So now on to the writer that helped bring James Jr. back into DC Comics with the character that he currently has been portraying, and that is to Batman number 19, where we have now this two-parter that precedes Zero Year, the kind of year-long story arc that Snyder and Capullo are going to be doing for Batman, which is going to be again more of the beginnings of Bruce Wayne as Batman, and just more insight into just beyond Batman Year One. Now, there have been, kind of both sides of the fence saying, Snyder says that he's going to respect the work that was done by Miller in Year One, and then there are some sources that are kind of saying, well, it actually is going to be undoing some of what was in Year One. So I think that both are right and both are wrong. I think that Snyder will probably, keep whatever he can of Year One, but it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be gospel, I guess is the point. And that may stick, but we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a long arc. It's going to go on for a while, and it's not even going to start for another couple of months. So let's concentrate on the here and now, and which is with this basically two-part kind of murder mystery that Snyder and Capullo have kind of said this is going to be kind of a little bit of an homage of their own style, kind of taken from the animated series. So it's a little bit of an homage to the animated series in the sense of just kind of how things kind of play out. So we have a couple of members of the Rogues Gallery Batman's Rogues Gallery making their first appearances of the New 52, at least that I've seen. Basically, we have Batman spending some of his time. We have this. Well, first of all, we have this opening where Bruce Wayne is holding up a bank, and he's killed people inside. And, Bullock and Gordon are out there, and they're basically, they don't understand why the hell Bruce Wayne would be doing something like this. And, Bruce Wayne, he's coming out of this bank with, he's got a female hostage named Martha, who is strapped with 20-odd pounds of dynamite, or with explosives. So, I mean, if they don't let him get away, that he's going to blow her up. And the one thing that really struck me about this opening sequence is the really creative use of panel structure, because you have kind of this, at the bottom of, I think, like I can't remember if it was the first or like the fourth page, that you have kind of this image of, a gun, just kind of the trigger guard and the hand around a gun that's being pointed towards Bruce Wayne. And Bruce Wayne does indeed make his escape, not before, both Gordon and Wayne get their shots off at each other. And, of course, Gordon's wearing his Kevlar, and some of Wayne's shirt has been torn away to reveal underneath the bat costume. And so he actually drives our way on this motorcycle over Commissioner Gordon. Jesus Christ. This guy can't catch a fucking break. And then we get back to 6 days earlier, in which we see this confrontation between Batman and the Reaper, in which he's planning on using this toxin delivered in these flowers to a funeral for the Falcone, for some member of the Falcone family, and who is there alongside of him but Robin. Damian is there with him, and what we see is that Batman has been spending a lot of time in the cave reviewing his cowl archives, because his cowl, it records all of, terabytes upon terabytes of information, so that he can study them and so on and so forth. And he's just been in the cave, just watching this archived footage of him and Damian. And so obviously we have again the death hitting him quite hard, and so much so that he's kind of ignored a death of a man that he had a lot of faith in, this man who apparently had committed suicide, and the reason for his suicide is that he seems to have taken out, we learned that this guy Wade, this Brian Wade character, he was sick, but then he actually found a cure for the disease that was killing him. So why would he commit suicide? And they look further into it. Batman, working as a detective, does his cross-referencing and finds that he actually killed a couple of the Penguin's men. So that's odd. Why would this guy go from upstanding member of society and survivor of whatever was killing him to becoming a murderer and then a victim of suicide? So this, of course, leads Bruce to start investigating that, and, well, for Batman to start investigating that. And, he's there, and, he's looking into Wade's apartment, and Wade bursts in with a fucking flamethrower, and, Batman, as always, ready with the batarang, right into the side of Wade's face. He drops the flamethrower and starts running after him and loses him in a crowd. Now, this is a big guy. It's a big dude. Hard to lose him in a crowd. And even, because Batman, of course, in his cowl, he has all these facial recognition patterns and everything like that he runs at all times, and can't find him anywhere. And there's the batarang just laying on the ground. Picks up the batarang, puts it into the Batplane's computer. I thought it was the Batmobile at first, but it's the Batplane he's flying around in. And again, is doing his due diligence as far as finding out, was this indeed this Brian Wade guy? And the computer says at first, yes, 100% accurate DNA. And then Batman, again, using his detective skills, which is something that I love Snyder so much for doing, really giving us Batman the detective at work, not forgetting that he is indeed a detective, and he's the world's greatest detective. But we see that he delves even deeper and deeper into the sequence of the DNA, where he does find the anomaly, which does reveal who this actually was, and it is Basil Karlo, aka Clayface. Now, it's interesting because Basil Karlo is given something of a new, uh, you know, something of a new origin story here, as the New 52 is wont to do. Because if you go back very far to the beginnings of Batman, the comic, Basil Karlo he was a horror film actor. It's basically, kind of, he was Boris Karloff, if you will. And he was kind of, he made up his face, and, that's who he was. He was just this madman killer who just put all this, putty and stuff on his face to hide who he really was. And then they solved the mystery of that, and Basil Karlo goes off to prison. And then you have the second Clayface, Matt Hagen, I believe, which, through this, he's going treasure diving, and, all this clay stuff comes out of this, this chest that he's looking at, and it infects him, and he is able to control his, he's able to mold his skin and everything like that into whoever he wants to. And then you have Clayface 3, which is, I can never remember the guy's name, and it hurts because I should remember his name. But the guy who has, very, very odd appearance. He's a brilliant man, but has, no woman can bear to be with him. And anyway, I know that I'm getting really off track, but this seems to be more kind of, back in the 80s, 90s, when they did kind of the this Detective Comics with, I think it was Alan Grant and Norman Breyfogle, did this whole series of kind of the Clayface, all of the Clayfaces coming together, so that actually Basil Karlo could become the ultimate Clayface. Even included a female Clayface. So this is kind of, it's basically Basil Karlo has mixed his origin story kind of with Matt Hagen's origin story to create this new Clayface, where it's just Basil Karlo. And basically this murder mystery becomes even more complex as Bruce is talking to, he's, with the understanding that Clayface is now free, he needs to get a new suit ready through Lucius Fox. And even though he thinks that he's talking to Lucius Fox, he kind of gets the sense that maybe he's talking to somebody else. And indeed he is. And Clayface has taken Lucius Fox's form and is starting to essentially not absorb, but to, he's going to do whatever he can to, via, I'm assuming that he requires some kind of tactile contact, that, he will then become Bruce Wayne so that he can take down Batman. So, we have that, that's the A story. So we're already off to a really strong start. And then we go into this really odd direction for the book, where we have our B-side, if you will, and it is the first kind of team-up of Batman and Superman. Now, I know that Ghost Critic did say something about, is this kind of like a teaser for the upcoming series that, I can't remember who's writing it, but I know that Jay Lee is going to be doing the art for it. Well, no, it's not. This is just literally, it's Superman showing up because he's kind of worried about Batman. He, Damian has just died. Superman knows this. And he kind of wants to talk about that, but there's something else that Batman has to look into, and that there is this house that 6 people have gone missing in, are presumed dead. And Batman's just like, well, even though Clark is still trying to get him to talk, but Bruce is just like, he's all business. He needs to find out what's going on here. And what is inside appears to be something that's making something that's making Clark very sick to his stomach. And it is a quote-unquote ghost light, or will-o'-the-wisp, or hobby lantern, and it is something supernatural that is lurking within this house, in this kind of almost tenement in the Narrows. And and they do eventually see this girl who is there but not there, and again is really hurting Superman. And of course this giant supernatural beast reveals itself at the very end. So it's like, okay, you got the world's strongest being next to you, and he's pretty much ineffectual right now. So is Batman going to have to pull his fat out of the fire, as well as solving whatever this mystery is? So to go into kind of a supernatural arena here is kind of is a very different tack for even the B stories to take. So, and I'm kind of enjoying the fact that they went there. But first of all, let's talk about this. Now, again, the influence that of the kind of the vibe of the animated series is something that I do feel, especially through the introduction of a character like Clayface, because Clayface is, he was a great character in the animated series, and I think that's specifically why they're using him here, is because they can do all sorts of fun stuff with him, by turning him into different people. So I mean, by having all of these great character beats for Bruce and Alfred, and this kind of deepening of the mystery, and this really wild, shocking opening, makes for some extremely compelling reading, and it's great. I love it. Now, Jonathan Glapion is not doing the inks on this. Danny Mickey is actually on inks here. And something that a number of people have commented on is the lightening of the color scheme for this particular issue, which was something that a lot of people noticed. I noticed it as well. FCO Placencia is still doing the color art, as he has done, I think, pretty much from the beginning. But because of the tie-in, the kind of homage, again, to the animated series, I think they want to make it seem brighter, that the colors are a little bit more vivid and not quite so muted as they have been, and dark throughout, Steiner and Capullo's run. I think they wanted to do something that seemed a little bit more, dare I say the word, fun, because it's kind of rare that this book allows the reader to not have fun with how awesome it is, but just to have fun in kind of a fun way. It's a murder mystery. It's a mystery story. Obviously, we know who the murderer is by the end of this issue, but the mystery as far as how will Bruce Wayne get out of this, as far as being that Clayface has taken him over and is robbing people and taking hostages and killing people. How does Bruce Wayne get around this? And of course, that will have to be somewhat solved, or maybe not, because this is only a two-parter. And my understanding, it may very well be a two-part standalone. It may be, we may end on maybe kind of a cliffhanger that will have to last throughout 0 years. So I'm very, very interested to see where this goes from here, and I'm really looking forward, really looking forward to the next issue, as I always do with Steiner and Capullo on Batman. But then when we get to the B story, is really unfortunately where the issue does kind of fall on some hard times, because again, I love Alex Maleev. I think Alex Maleev is a brilliant artist. I think that he can do superhero stuff. It's just that his particular style is so dark. This particular issue, the B story, it's so kind of almost relentlessly darkly colored and darkly shaded and darkly inked that you feel like, what am I mean the art is still terrific, but it is so dark that it becomes almost like obscura vision. I mean, it's like it's just you can't really see. Everything seems to be almost too muted. And even though I like that they're bringing kind of a supernatural element into a Batman story, you know, will it eventually have maybe a more down-to-earth explanation? I don't know. But I am still willing to go for this ride. I mean, it's part of the issue that I'm already going to be getting anyway, so I might as well read it. But this story, I think, does kind of serve as a little bit of a tease to the team-up, you know, this upcoming Superman-Batman series. It would have maybe been more effective if Jay Lee himself had been doing the art, but no, you know, Alex Maleev did the B story art for the previous issue with Harper Row, so why not, you know, have him continue? So I think it was maybe not the best call, but it's still a good call. I mean, if you're going to get an artist, why not get Alex Maleev? Alex Maleev is a great artist. It's just, I know his style isn't particularly suited for the superhero comic, but, you know, if I go back and I look at the great stuff that he did with, you know, with Bendis on Daredevil, with Bendis on Moon Knight, you know, this is a guy that can draw really dynamic superhero stuff. It's just that, you know, his style seems to be better suited to more kind of grounded in reality stuff, you know, with, you know, titles like Scarlet. So, but still, all in all, this, aside from, you know, kind of the missteps of that B story, this is still an extremely solid issue of Batman. 4.5 out of 5. Really solid work. And that brings us to our book of the week from DC. Again, it's a hard one to choose between because this is ultimately, I think that Hawkeye wins out, but only by a hair. And that's because this issue is so fucking good, and that is Batman and Robin number 19. Of course, this is Batman and Red Robin. And what we have here is still coming off of the probably you can't really say some. I can't really espouse the virtues of the previous issue of Batman and Robin any more highly than I already have, but I would certainly say that it is definitely one of the best single issues of the New 52 thus far. It's strange to say that, but it is true. It was such a brilliant issue. The Requiem issue of Batman and Robin. It was just stunning and so beautifully done. And we follow that up. We're still very much with not the Batman of action that we've seen just in Batman. You know, this is someone who is still, this is a man who's still very kind of almost paralyzed by the death of his son. And he starts looking into, those of us who read Batman and Robin number 18, the silent issue, we saw this list of films that had the initials CK. Well, the only person that we can really assume that that is referring to is Clark Kent. That maybe somehow Damian was, because all the films seem to be kind of like almost kind of classic Americana tales. And you would figure, okay, well, these are films that Clark Kent would recommend to a young man like Damian. But no, in fact, it's another person initialed CK, and that person is Carrie Kelly. So yes, we have the official introduction of Carrie Kelly into the DC Universe proper. Now, of course, the future Carrie Kelly that we see in Dark Knight Returns, this is obviously not part of continuity. This is just, you know, this was a character that Frank Miller had created for Batman for The Dark Knight Returns and ultimately for The Dark Knight Strikes Again, which, you know, obviously an extremely contentious piece of work. But I do somewhat proudly own a trade of that signed by Miller that a friend of mine bought for me from the CBLDF desk at Wizard World Chicago, I think back in 2003 or 2004. Anyway, so I think it was 2004. Anyway, so yeah, this is we have Carrie Kelly, and Carrie Kelly is a film student. It seems to be. She wants to be a filmmaker, and so when Bruce first comes to confront her, she is actually there. It's not Halloween, but they're just having kind of a costume party. Of course, she answers the door in a Robin outfit, and this just like, you know, it just throws him even further into this, you know, into his despair that this was a part of his life that this was a part of Damien's life that Bruce never knew he had. So to discover more about it and to, you know, again, be confronted with this image immediately upon the door opening, you know, we have the, you know, again, it's a huge blow to him. And, you know, he gives her, you know, the films that she left for Damien back to him. And, you know, there's a moment where, you know, he just slips off and, you know, and she's left questioning, where's Damien? Where is he gone? And of course, I mean, he can't really say, because maybe it's because he just can't bring himself to say it. I mean, I don't know if it's supposed to be a secret that, I mean, I'm sure that it would have to be kept secret that his son is dead, because, you know, Robin killed, obviously, but there have been other deaths that have taken place where at least they're able to work around the fact that they were, you know, I mean, Jason Todd's death, I'm sure that they had to work around that somehow. You know, kind of have no one be the wiser. But it does present something of a quandary for all of the titles, for all the Bat titles, kind of, to have, you know, this, you know, a son that people know that Bruce Wayne has is gone. I mean, I don't know if he'll explain that he just kind of went back to live with his mother or something to that effect. I don't know, but we're not there yet, so we're not going to continue to speculate on that. But as he goes home, he finds himself more driven, more purposeful, with a very singular intent. And then we kind of almost smash cut to Frankenstein, Agent of Shade, and he's fighting off some otherworldly demon, what have you, and all of a sudden he is captured by Batman and is lifted out of there and brought to the Arctic Circle, where Victor Frankenstein, back to his kind of ancestral home, if you will, where he was created. And for the last however long, Batman has been kind of researching the methods of resurrection, and that he is confident that Frankenstein will be able to unlock the secrets to resurrect Damien. And then we have this tremendous, incredibly powerful confrontation between Batman and Frankenstein, as he's, you know, as Frankenstein is making a case for why this is unholy. It's wrong to do this. And Batman's argument is like, you have no idea the darkness that I'm going through right now. You have no idea what it's like to have your son taken from you. And Frankenstein, if you read Agents of Shade, does know exactly what that feels like, because he had to kill his own son, not once, but twice. Originally in 1959, and then more recently in the run of the comic when Lemire was still writing it. And these are both men who, well, I call Frankenstein a man because I think that he is one. But these are both souls that have lost their children. But Batman, of course, he makes the case that, well, if you had to do that to your own son, you failed him. And I'm not going to fail mine, no matter what the cost. And so he puts out, he takes out Frankenstein, more or less, and removes his head and still leaves his vocal cords attached and everything like that, so he can kind of help talk his way through the surgery that he's planning on doing to resurrect Damien. And he does have bodies he's brought with, young people's bodies that have been donated to science, or maybe I don't know if they're all young, but basically bodies that have been brought, that he's stolen from. They were donated to science, but he's repurposed them to further his own agenda. And of course, this is not when Alfred has decided to call Tim, but this is when Tim shows up. So he was able to track Batman to exactly where he's gone, and can't believe his fucking eyes what he's trying to do. And at this point in time, Tim does his level-headed best to try and talk some sense into him, but Batman's just not having any. He's too far gone. He's so far into denial, which is what this book's title is, that he's willing to do anything to bring him back. And there is, of course, then the fight between Bruce and Tim, where Tim is literally trying to beat some sense into him, but he knows that that's not going to happen. It's just not going to work out. I mean, this is Batman. We're talking about one of the world's greatest fighters. And Tim is a very, very pale reflection of his physical prowess, so he has to rely on what he has, which is his smarts. And that he uses the Titan's jet that he came in to kind of blast the shit out of the lab, and forcing, basically undoing Batman's work. And this leaves, his work is undone. It cannot be redone. And instead of, answering the question, would Damien have wanted this, he just leaves. And then we get kind of this coda in which we do see Carrie Kelly. She is kind of a fun-loving young woman who is, is kind of ruminating about, still, where's Damien gone? And, refers to Bruce as his daddy Warbucks. And, but has decided to settle up on the whatever instruction that she was giving him by giving her a check for $10,000. So whether or not this means that somehow Bruce is moving forward from his denial, because, you have that cast of, the caste system of the, of the 5 stages of grief. You have your denial, then, your bargaining, your depression, and then, I can't remember what the fourth one is, but then you have the fifth, which is acceptance. And all of us who've lost a loved one know what that all means. We've all gone through it. And, you know, this is kind of both denial and bargaining in one issue, where Batman is literally looking to do something decidedly unholy to resurrect his own son. It's you know, it's not as powerful as the previous issue, of course. I mean, it is going to be really hard to get an issue like that again anytime soon. But Tomasi and Gleason do their level best to make this as smart, as emotionally harrowing, and as interesting and exciting of a book that they can make. Tomasi has the voice of Frankenstein so perfectly. It is awesome to behold how easily Tomasi has, how he worked with Frankenstein in this issue. It is an absolute gem of writing. And, you know, every moment is so powerful. And, of course, Patrick Gleason just doing kind of another masterclass of comic book illustration here. I mean, just down to the kind of stubble that Batman is growing. You know, we see, you know, that he is, again, retreating into the darkness of his own soul, and it's expressing itself through, you know, it's actually coming out just out of his face. The darkness is literally, it's coming out of his face. He's not keeping himself groomed because he just doesn't care. And there is a brilliant 2-page spread in this issue where all of the panels, it's like a 16 panel spread, and they are stitched together. All the panels are stitched individually together, and it's just such an awesome visual moment for this book to have these moments, these individual stitched panels, you know, seeing, okay, not only are we dealing with Frankenstein, but what Bruce is attempting to do, which is literally to stitch dead bodies together, but also the kind of fabric that his psyche is undergoing right now is that he just seems to be almost kind of a rag doll, and that he's just barely stitched together at this point in time. So, I mean, it works both, you know, artistically, metaphorically, and just kind of almost and on the nose. So it works in every conceivable way possible. It's just a brilliant, brilliant moment for Patrick Gleason. And, you know, there's just no denying that this is absolutely a pick of the week. This was an excellent, excellent book, and absolutely a 5 out of 5. Hawkeye #9 just edges this one out for the pick of the week, but as far as great storytelling is concerned from DC this week, it definitely came again from Batman and Robin #19. So we're done. I know it's been over 3 hours that we have been discussing all of these titles and all the books that came out last week. Next week, you know, this week is kind of a light week. I am going to be picking up, someone did, like I said, I have to go back and kind of look. There was someone who recommended Mars Attacks. I will be picking up that issue this week as a book to read. I will be picking up the next issue of Conan, because that was recommended to me as well. But you've got some mileage ahead of you, because, like I said, Thor: God of Thunder, it definitely seems like the book to beat right now. So that is it for this week. So again, thanks to all of you who've watched me night to night here. I know that you know, some maybe have skipped a chapter here or there because they didn't read a lot of these titles. I know some of you didn't pick up any Marvel last week. And I'm looking at you, Ghost Critic. But I know that you watched anyway. So again, thank you all for watching, and those of you who are listening to me on iTunes, thank you so much for listening. If this is your first time here, please subscribe. Yes, all of these are about this long. I usually don't spend this long talking about just 4 issues, but these were 4 big issues. They were important. At least 2 of them were very big and very important to talk about. So that's where I'm going to leave it. And so we're done for this week of New Comics, bitches! So thank you again so much for watching. Thank you for listening out there. Come back next week. We'll have more for you. And that is it. So to all of you, I'm James Donnelly. You are now exiting the Shadow Gallery for this week. And as always, remember to stay in the shadows.